It was spring break. I had just turned 19, and that year my family decided to take a trip to a small cabin out in northern Wisconsin. It was just me, my mom, and my younger brother, who was only 8 at the time. We planned to stay at this cabin for the entire week, and part of the reason for going to Wisconsin was to check out some of the small towns and look for a place we might want to move to later on. Anyway, the cabin my mom reserved was one we had never been to before, and I don't think she realized just how far it was from any nearby towns. She was probably more focused on the price. It was way up north and about 40 minutes away from the closest shopping area. I guess it was a good way to see how we'd handle living out in the country. The drive there took a little over 11 hours. I drove for the first few hours and my mom handled the rest. We reached the cabin right as the sun was setting. It was beautiful, the orange skies fading over the thick forest and all the wildlife, way different from the big buildings and busy streets we were used to. The cabin itself looked pretty old, though. Everything creaked, and it didn't seem like it had been built by professionals. It was still fine, though. It was just a cabin. We got settled in for the night, trying out the wood-burning fireplace and just relaxing after the long drive. I ended up sleeping most of the evening. My mom went to bed around 9 o'clock, but because of my nap, I stayed up a little later. My little brother was already asleep in his room, so it was just me hanging out by myself in the cabin. I sat by the fireplace on my phone for a bit, then decided to get some fresh air and check out the back deck. It was a tiny wooden patio with a sketchy-looking fire pit in the middle and a few chairs around it. I sat down and stared out into the woods. The night was really peaceful. No traffic, no sirens. Just an occasional bird call off in the distance and the trees shifting in the breeze. I loved it. Being farther up north, though, it was a little colder than I thought it would be. I spotted some logs stacked along the side of the cabin and figured I'd give the fire pit a try. I lit it up without any trouble, and the fire stayed pretty well contained in the middle, so I guess it wasn't as sketchy as it looked. Anyway, I sat there for a while. I don't get to do that sort of thing very often, so I just tried to enjoy every minute of it. After about 30 minutes outside, there was this sudden, random noise coming from somewhere out in the woods. Honestly, I had no clue what it could have been. The way it echoed through the trees, it sounded kind of like someone swinging an axe into a tree or splitting wood. But it was just a single sound, and I didn't think it was likely that anyone would be out there near us. It was completely dark beyond the firelight, so I couldn't see anything, but whatever it was had sounded pretty close. As I stayed outside for another 5 minutes or so after hearing it, I started feeling a little uneasy, just this nervous feeling that ruined the calm from earlier. I decided to put the fire out and head back into the cabin. From the sounds inside, my mom and brother were already asleep. I still wasn't very tired, though. I don't know if it was because of my earlier nap or if that sound outside had gotten my adrenaline up, but either way, I wasn't ready for bed. I stayed in the living room scrolling through my phone. I had some movies downloaded, so I didn't have to worry about needing Wi-Fi. Only about 15 minutes into the movie, I heard something. I paused it and listened. I couldn't tell if it was just the cabin creaking from someone moving around in their room, or maybe just the wind hitting the walls. Still, it gave me that nervous feeling again. I wasn't used to being somewhere so remote, so I think that's why I got so jumpy. A minute later, I heard it again. But this time, it came from the opposite end of the cabin, not near the bedrooms. It came from right outside the wall next to me. The only thing there was a window. I leaned in a little closer and listened. Just when I thought I might have been imagining it, a loud series of knocks rattled the front door, making the wooden walls shudder. I froze where I was. Then I heard my mom get out of bed and rush into the hallway, asking what was going on. By that point, I was already standing, knowing something was seriously wrong, and told her someone was knocking at the door. I could tell she was scared too. She quickly grabbed her phone and called 911. Since there was no good reason for anyone to be knocking on our door in the middle of nowhere, especially at that hour. While she was on the phone, I walked up to the door and peeked through the peephole. It was really dark outside, no porch lights or anything, but I could make out the basic shape of a man standing just a few feet away, facing the door. And in the darkness, I could clearly see the outline of a heavy wooden axe in his hand. My heart started pounding, and a million thoughts raced through my head. I tried to come up with any explanation for why he might be there. Maybe he was lost, maybe he needed help, but nothing really made sense. Nothing made this seem like anything but bad news. The man banged on the door several more times while my mom stayed on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. He never said a word, no explanation, no asking for help, just loud, aggressive knocking. In the moment, it was hard to tell how much time was passing. Felt like forever. Then he did exactly what we were afraid of. One loud smash hit the door, and a little bit of the metal edge of the axe pierced through the wood. That was when we all ran to the farthest room in the cabin and locked the door behind us. We could hear more strikes against the front door, but after 4 or 5 more hits, everything went quiet. We didn't know if he had broken through or if he had given up and left. We just waited there, holding our breath. It took just under 15 minutes for the first police officer to get to the cabin, which honestly was faster than we thought it would be, considering how far out we were. The front door had several huge gashes in it, but there was no sign that the man had made it inside. There also weren't any clear tracks showing where he went. They just assumed he walked back into the woods. The running theory was that the guy had seen the glow from my campfire from deep in the woods and followed it to the cabin. It still didn't explain what he was doing out there so late at night with an axe, or why he decided to come to our door like that. But there wasn't really any way to know for sure without finding him and asking. We obviously didn't stay there after that, in case you were wondering. And no, we didn't end up moving to Wisconsin either. This happened during a road trip last spring. I was taking a long route back home after visiting a few family members, so I was driving about 4 hours each day toward a different stop. This was after my final visit. Everything left on the last 8 hours of the drive home was nothing but endless forest as far as I could tell. There was another town I had thought about stopping at, but it was too far off the route to make sense. From my previous stop, I left around 5:30 p.m. to reach my final Airbnb, which was a cabin about 2 hours away. It happened to be right on the road home, so it seemed like the best option. I figured it would be nicer than any cheap motel along the way. Where I was, the landscape was mostly flat with a lot of trees scattered here and there. When I pulled up to the cabin, it was clear they had planted a row of tall pine trees perfectly lined up at the front, with a gravel driveway running right through the center. Honestly, the outside mixed with the setting was a little creepy. I parked and used the padlock code I had gotten through email from the host. Even though the outside looked older, the inside had been freshly renovated, clearly to rent it out as an Airbnb. It was really nice inside, small but cozy. I didn't unpack much since I was just staying the night. I sat down at the table and ate some fast food I had grabbed earlier. But only about 10 minutes after settling in, there was a knock at the door. It startled me since I hadn't heard a car pull up or any footsteps outside. I got up and answered it. Standing there was a man who looked to be in his late 30s, with a graying beard and a shaved head. "Hey, I just wanted to stop by and make sure you got in okay," he said with a smile. Assuming he was the host, I told him everything was fine and thanked him. Then I said goodnight and closed the door. I thought it was a little odd he showed up without letting me know first, but figured maybe he lived nearby or even on the same property. One thing I noticed was that he had a really strong smell about him, like he'd been working hard outdoors all day. I just thought it was a little weird. I went back to the table and finished eating, then took a shower to relax before bed. I wasn't in there long, maybe 5 minutes, before I felt sleepy enough to just crash. I dried off and jumped into bed, staying on my phone for a little while. Then there was another knock at the door. It scared me just like the first time, because again, no sounds of a car or footsteps. I figured it must have been the host again, but why would he be back so soon? It immediately felt off and made me uneasy. I checked my phone. No missed calls or texts from him. I slowly made my way to the front room, hearing him knock again and again. I didn't know if I should answer, so instead, I just called out from behind the door, asking what he needed. He stopped knocking. "Can you open the door, please? I just wanted to ask one more thing. It'll be quick, promise," he said. I stayed quiet for a few seconds, not sure how to respond. After a few moments, he knocked again and asked if I could open the door. I said it was late, and unless it was an emergency, I would rather be left alone. He didn't answer right away. The silence that followed was really unsettling. After about a minute passed, it felt even worse. I hadn't heard him walk away. Was he still standing out there? I carefully moved closer to the door and peeked through the little window. Nobody was there. My first thought was that he must have snuck off, but it was odd because the gravel should have crunched under his steps. So where did he go? I stood by the door, frozen, listening for any noise. Honestly, I was too scared to move. Then I glanced toward the living room window. His eyes were staring straight into mine. I panicked and bolted for the bedroom, where I immediately called 911. While waiting, I heard noises like someone trying to lift the window open. It was terrifying, but also strange because I realized, wouldn't the real host have a key to his own property? That's when everything clicked. That man wasn't the host. The police showed up after a while, but he had already run off. We had no idea where he went. We got in touch with the actual host, who confirmed it. I never found out what that guy was planning, and honestly, I don't want to, but I'm just thankful I didn't open that door. I live in southern Idaho on the edge of a small highway town. There's not much here except a few shops, a couple of truck stops, and a motel right along the main road. The roads leading out from town are all dirt, winding off toward a few scattered houses and large pieces of private land covered in forest and grassy fields. This was a pretty normal day for me. I worked remotely from my house and finished up around 5:30. After that, I headed into town to pick up some groceries and grab a few supplies for around the house. Even though it was a highway town, the highway itself wasn't that busy, so none of the stores ever felt too crowded. I pulled into the lot and went inside to start shopping. While I was in there, I noticed a man looking at me. At first, I didn't think much about it. I probably just glanced his way at the wrong moment while he happened to be looking over. I continued going about my shopping, but a few minutes later, in a completely different aisle, I saw him again out of the corner of my eye. He walked into the same empty aisle I was in and stood about 5 or 6 feet off to my right. I kept facing forward, trying to find what I needed, but I noticed he wasn't moving around or picking up anything. I shifted my eyes slightly to the side without turning my head, just enough to get a better look. Even without looking directly at him, I could tell he was staring at me. I said hello quickly, then went back to what I was doing. The guy didn't say anything back. I quickly grabbed what I needed and left the aisle. Honestly, I just figured the man was a little strange, but I didn't overthink it. I paid for my stuff at the checkout and headed back out to my car. I usually park toward the back of the lot, and today was no different. I loaded everything into the trunk and got into the driver's seat. When I looked around the lot, there were maybe 30 or 40 cars parked there, but something felt off. That's when I saw him again. He was standing between two vehicles, looking in my direction. He wasn't carrying any shopping bags or anything, so it didn't even seem like he had bought anything. What the hell was wrong with this guy? Probably some weird trucker running on no sleep or something, I thought. I pulled out of the parking lot and started heading home. By then, the sun had mostly set, and the dirt roads were dark and quiet. I parked in front of my house and carried in the first couple of grocery bags. While putting things away, I got sidetracked by a phone call from my mom, but eventually, I went back outside to get the rest of the bags. When I stepped out, I saw something that made me stop. I had to squint for a second, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. Off the side of the dirt road, further out on my land, there was a truck. Its lights were off, and I could only make out its shape against the night sky. I owned just under 35 acres of land, and where that truck was parked was definitely my property. It wasn't there when I got home. If someone was just lost or turning around, why would they have parked there with the lights completely off? I moved carefully to my car, keeping an eye on the truck while grabbing the rest of the groceries. The best explanation I could come up with was that it was maybe some driver who had pulled off the highway and thought the open land would be a good place to catch some sleep instead of paying for a motel. Even though it was my property, I wasn't about to go out there and start a problem. You never know who might be inside or what they might do. I went back inside and finished putting away the groceries. I opened the front curtains just a bit so I could keep an eye on the area without being too obvious. Over the next hour or so, my nerves started to settle. It had to just be a tired driver sleeping it off. Still weird, but probably not dangerous. I spent another hour or so sitting in the living room watching a show. I never saw the truck move once. Eventually, it got late, and I closed the curtains before heading upstairs to bed. I think I fell asleep pretty quickly. In the middle of the night, though, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. I didn't look at the time, but I figured it was around 2 or 3 in the morning. Half asleep, I got up and crossed the bedroom toward the hallway where the bathroom was. As soon as I opened the door, I heard a creaking sound downstairs. I had never heard that noise before. I paused and listened carefully, then opened and shut the door again to see if it made the same noise. It didn't. I walked to the end of the hallway and looked down the stairs. It was completely dark down there except for a faint bit of moonlight coming through the kitchen windows. But there was something in that downstairs hallway. I could see a shadow moving slightly against the wall. I couldn't tell if someone was inside the hallway or standing outside near the back door, with their shadow cast against the wall. Either way, my heart started pounding in my chest. I slowly backed up and slipped back into my bedroom, closing the door gently so it wouldn't make a sound. I grabbed my phone and called the police right away, keeping my voice low. For the first few minutes, I didn't hear anything. I started to doubt myself. Maybe they weren't actually in the house. Then I heard creaking again, very slow footsteps moving across the floor below me. It sounded like they were walking into the living room. About a minute later, I saw flashing lights outside as a police car pulled up. I heard a scuffle downstairs, heavy footsteps rushing around, and then someone bolted out the back. The officers chased after him, and thankfully, they caught him not far from the truck that had been parked out in the field. To my shock, it was the same creepy man from the store earlier. Turns out he really had been stalking me. Worse than him just following me and breaking into my home, he was armed. The man claimed he was just trying to rob me, but the way he had been acting, it felt way more personal than that. I don't know how long he had been inside before I heard him, but he hadn't taken anything. He didn't even have a bag or anything to steal stuff with, and he knew I was home. He must have been watching me from somewhere outside all night. What he had really planned to do is something I'd rather not even think about.